I grew up in a small town in the northwest of England. It's called Ellesmere Port. So I worked hard. I also partied very hard. Oh yes, and if there was a dance floor, I'd be there.
You know, in your 20s, you were always exploring your life. Is it that time when you realized that you have maybe a teacher in you?
I want to be a teacher. I used to look at my teachers and think I could do that. So I taught for 6 years in the UK.
Wow.
Between the ages of 22 and 28, I was in a relationship and I was so happy, very in love. And it wasn't until the relationship broke down.
Not all men are like that. Moving from your partners to your parents' home and then having to find out that you have cancer, going through that treatment.
That's when the moment happened.
What do you do when life unravels faster than you can hold it together? In just 6 months, Lottie's world collapsed. A toxic relationship ended, a cancer diagnosis followed. And suddenly the life she thought she was building, the version of success she'd clung to, felt like a fragile illusion. Back in her childhood home in the UK, surrounded by silence and second guessing, Lottie started asking questions she had never dared to ask before. Is this really it? Is this all life has to offer? And that's when something shifted. Not from a book, but from conversations. Friends living abroad, teaching in faraway places, living lives that didn't follow the script. And those conversations cracked something open. What if there was something more? What if the life she wanted wasn't in fixing the old, but in starting something entirely new? So she chose to leap, far from the familiar into the unknown. She boarded a plane to Dubai with nothing but a suitcase and a second chance. This is the story of what happened next. In today's episode of the Mann Podcast, we sit down with Lottie, a woman who traded rock bottom for reinvention. From the classrooms of the UK to the vibrant life she's built in Dubai. This is a story of risk, resilience, and the magic of saying yes. If you've ever felt stuck or unsure about your next step, this episode might just be the nudge you needed. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. Grab the headphones and let's begin. Welcome to the Mann Podcast, where we explore bold decisions and beautiful detours that shape our lives. Today, I'm joined by someone whose journey is equal parts brave, honest, and inspiring. Lottie, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to share your story with our listeners.
Thank you so much, Addy. I'm really excited about being on this podcast today. It's my first ever experience with podcasting. So thank you so much for having me on.
I just want to add, it was a very random, I wouldn't say random, very spontaneous conversation that we had during one of your quizzes, which we'll get into. And we got to know each other. And after a very quick conversation during your quizzes, we thought that we'll get you to our podcast. So thank you for making the time today. And let's get started. So let's rewind a little bit. Tell us about your life growing up in the UK. How was the environment? What was it like?
Okay, so I grew up in a small town in the northwest of England. It's called Ellesmere Port. I've lived there my whole life. All of my family, all the generations have been there for years and years. It's a very industrial town. It's got a huge Shell oil refinery next door, so you kind of descend into a big cloud of smoke when you go in, but it's home. And there's a big, strong sense of community there. And people kind of never move away. They all stay, and it's a very hard-working life there. And everyone knows everyone. It was a lovely place to grow up. And whenever I go back, I feel all that love. As soon as I land at the airport, Manchester Airport, drive to Ellesmere Port, It's all the love. And the thing that puts Ellesmere Port on the map is actually a place called Cheshire Oaks. It's a designer outlet, and anyone in the UK, north or south, will have heard of Cheshire Oaks.
All right. So talk about your 20s. How was it like growing up in your 20s in the UK?
It was good. It was good. After high school, I went to university at the University of Sheffield. And when you move from school to university, there's always this big transition that happens. You kind of grow up, you're out in the world for the first time without your parents, without your home friends, and you can kind of be who you authentically are. And I really found that I had a great friendship group at Sheffield University, and I started to become more myself. I think at high school, you're always trying to find yourself, and there's always different groups of people, you're finding your way. And at university, this is where you shape yourself. And I just fully just relaxed and became me. I studied English literature. I'm a huge bookworm, love anything about books. And I just had the best time. So I worked hard. I also partied very hard. Oh, yes. And if there was a dance floor, I'd be there. Alcohol, used to love it all.
I can imagine.
Student union nights used to go off. But I still managed to get all of my work done and came out of that with a 2:1 degree. So I was happy with that.
Wow.
But I had a great time.
Right. Would you say, I mean, during that time when you were exploring, in your 20s, you were always exploring your life. Is it that time when you realized that you have maybe a teacher in you?
Yes. It's funny with teachers. I feel like it's a vocation. So I think from a young age, we kind of know what we want to do. That was the case in my case. From a young age, I thought, I want to be a teacher. I used to look at my teachers and think I could do that. I'm also a very organized person. And I feel like maybe I kind of like to be in control a bit. I think all teachers do have that side of them. They like to run their own classroom. And I remember from a young age, I used to be, playing shop with my parents, used to pretend I had a shop, and they'd come and they'd buy library books. All of the Mr. Men and Little Miss books used to be laid out. Parents used to come and pay 20p for a book. This kind of like, it was always in me to be instructional maybe, or front of house, shall we say. And that's kind of what all teachers are, I think.
Would you say you always had a helping nature?
Yeah. A lot of this comes from my parents. So my parents are amazing people. It was just me and my mum and dad growing up. There's the three of us. And my mum and dad were always helping people. And I remember we're always big churchgoers. My mum and dad have a very strong Christian faith. And we would be at church every week. And then my dad would be helping all the elderly members of the church. He's a plumber by trade, so we'd go and fix their pipes, whatever they needed. They used to help with Christian Aid every year. They constantly give to charity now. And my childhood was always very morally driven. So whenever, for example, they always used to say to me, if you said something, how would that make someone feel? And they would always parent from a moral angle. So it was constantly reflecting. And if I could help people in any way, they would be the first ones to say, go and help them. No gain to yourself, go and help people. And I think that having that upbringing really does shape you into, this is what I want to do in my life, which evolved into the teaching for sure.
Would you want to speak a little bit about your journey into becoming a teacher and then, moving to Dubai to pursue that?
Yes. So even though I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, I also wanted to go and have the university experience. And I didn't want to study teaching at university. I wanted to do a core subject, for example, English literature. And then after I finished uni, there was a 1-year degree that you could do. It was called a PGCE, postgraduate certificate in education. And it only took 1 year if you had a degree already. So I took a year out and I was a teaching assistant. Just to kind of get experience of being in the classroom and working with children. And then being a teaching assistant enabled me to get a place on the course, because teaching back in the UK was really competitive. And I graduated uni in 2010 from Sheffield. It was really hard to get a place on a course. And I eventually did get a place at the University of Chester to do the 1-year training to be a teacher. And I went for the primary. And it was funny, they were interviewing me and they stopped me halfway through and they said, have you ever thought about early years, ages 3 to 7? And I said, no. And they said, you've just got a face for early years. We're going to fast track you to the early years section. I was kind of taken out of the room, took down to another room, and then got a place on the early years course. And it was like, when you just think that things are meant to be and people see things in you. And I've been an early years teacher ever since, and I loved that. So,
Wow.
yeah, it's funny how things work out.
Yeah.
So I taught for 6 years in the UK.
Wow.
In 2 different schools on the Wirral and in Cheshire. And then I had a couple of experiences in my personal life which led me to Dubai and teaching in Dubai.
What brought you, because it's a big decision, isn't it, to take a leap from going to teach in schools in UK to coming to Dubai and teaching here. Was it always in your mind to teach abroad, or was it a decision that was made after certain life experiences?
Definitely after what I'd experienced in my 20s. It was never on the map. In my 20s, between the ages of 22 and 28, I was in a relationship where we quickly got a house, a mortgage, we got a dog, and it was just the thing that was our life, and that's all I could see. And I was very happy with that life. He was a teacher as well, but he was 9 years older than me, so he was further down the scale. He was senior leadership team when I was a kind of trainee teacher, and I looked up to him like, well, this is where I want to be in 9 years' time. And it wasn't until the relationship broke down that I actually thought I need to do something completely different. And that relationship breakdown made me go on the course to Dubai. Mm-hmm. If that hadn't have happened, I would have never have thought about teaching abroad, because I think you get set in the life that you're in.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is what I want to do, teach until I'm 66, retirement age in the UK. And then things just suddenly just go up and down. And then you're off on a different life course, which is the best thing about life.
Saying that, going from a relationship which was that bad to moving to a different city, totally different country, not even a different city, is a huge decision to take. How did you reach to that point of taking that decision?
I actually had 3 friends that were living in Dubai whilst I was going through quite a turbulent time. And I had my friend Sarah, who I grew up with. She was a flight attendant. She was crew for Emirates. And she said, have you ever considered Dubai? And that was when I was in my relationship. And she said, you should move out here together and you should be a teacher because the package is really good. The lifestyle is great. And she'd been living here for 5 years. So that was the first thing where I thought that might be a good idea. And I did approach my partner at the time and said, do you think we should look at teaching abroad? To which he said, absolutely not, because he was very secure and he was being primed to be a head teacher at that point. So he didn't want to move anywhere else. And then also I had 2 friends who I used to teach with in the UK, and they were at 2 different schools here. And they said, the work-life balance is better. The hours, it's kind of better in every way. And teaching in the UK back then, the red tape was starting to come in where it was really hard to take children on school trips. There was tons of paperwork coming in, and they said it's much easier here. There's not so many regulations and it's different to the UK teaching. So I think they planted the seed about Dubai. So then I came for a holiday in 2017. I thought, let's go and see where it's like. And then as soon as I got here, I loved it. I loved it. Everything about it. The weather, the people, the food. And I thought, this is where I'm going to be.
Thank you for sharing that, Lottie. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about your, turbulent experiences, both in personal life, and how did that shape you as a person back in your 20s and growing up in your 30s, and then, pushing you into taking a decision to come to a new city in your later years?
Yeah, so my relationship that lasted 6 years at home, it moved very fast, and we were living together extremely fast. And I was so happy, very in love, thought this was it forever. But we did have different ideas of what we wanted the relationship to be. So I wanted to get married, for example, and then have children later on down the line. At this point, I was 23, 24. But because he was older, he wanted to have a child straight away. So we became very much in a stalemate. And he didn't have a great upbringing himself. And he did not like the idea of marriage. He thought it was very, he'd be trapped. Whereas I saw my mum and dad have an extremely successful marriage, still are. And that to me is the pinnacle and what I would strive to have. So I was very much about, let's have the family, 2.0 family with the marriage and everything. But it soon became apparent we were very different people, but we still loved each other very much. And then I started to become aware that he was changing in the fact that he was coming home from work quite late. And then on the weekends, he was going to events and things. And I'd say, do you want to come with you? And he's like, oh, no, I'm going to go. And little things that you don't realize at the time, but now you look back and things like his phone, he'd never leave it out. If he went into the shower, the phone would go with him. I used to think, that's strange. And, when you're out of it, you suddenly see all of it. But when you're in it, you don't see it at all. And you just think, oh, he's starting to change a little bit. And then it became apparent on year number 6 that he'd developed a relationship at the school that he was in with a female teacher who also had a family. She had a partner and 2 children. And they'd developed a strong relationship connection. And they'd actually been seeing each other for 2 years previous to when I found out. And I later found out that his whole family knew all. I think it was a case of him that he wanted to end the relationship that he had with me, but he didn't know the right time to say it. And when it all happened and I became aware of everything, my entire world crashed, because this was somebody who I was in love with. And I put all my energy into our life together. So I got very obsessed with the house. I don't know if other people go through this. When you get your first home, I painted it all. We landscaped the garden together. Just a patch of grass became this beautiful garden. And we were down the garden centre every week, and we were at B&Q buying paint, and it became obsessive. I don't know how I got so down that rabbit hole. And when it all came out, it was just absolutely just devastating that not only our relationship had broken down, but the whole ideal of, the marriage and the family and the life. And we had a dog, gorgeous cockapoo dog called Stanley. And when it all came out, he tried to salvage it and say, I actually don't want that person. I want to stay with you. To which I said, absolutely not. I got the dog under one arm, a suitcase under the other, and I just left the house, moved back in with my parents, and then I was age 28 at this point. And my parents were so shocked because this guy was so charismatic and so he had everything together, and none of my family and myself believed that he was capable of having, it was almost a double life, because it had been going on for 2 years. And, sometimes I used to say, are you seeing somebody else? When he'd come home late and he'd look me dead in the eye and he'd say, no. And it was the eye contact that he'd have. And he was almost gaslighting, why would you think that? I've been at this event and I've been at this event. Very manipulative behavior, because my role model is my dad, who's an incredibly honest person. And I'd never met men who were able to kind of look at you or, anybody and say, lie straight to your face, basically. I don't think there's many people who can do that as well as what he did it. And I just felt completely humiliated, small, destroyed, really. So I moved back in with my parents. And from that moment, that's when things, started to look up a bit, because when you go back to your parental home, they kind of give you all that love and warmth back again. And my dad had a really frank conversation with me. My dad is not he's a man of few words, really. But he said to me, not all men are like this. You have to take this, box it over here, and just go into your next relationship with a fresh slate. And not everybody is going to do that. And the person who is meant for you will never treat you like that. At the time, I was on the floor and I just kind of went, yeah. But that's really valuable advice. And I still think about that now, is that every person that you meet, you have to treat them with a fresh slate, and not everybody is going to do harm to you.
I have to say something. I'm getting overwhelmed right now. That is what stood out about you. I love the fact that your father, chose those words to put you at ease and say, not all men are like that. It's a big perspective not everyone has. Would you want to say something about that?
Yes, I think it's when something like this happens, when you are the person who's been cheated on, and it happens so much. It's you need to remember that this is their choice. It's a choice to go down that path of pursuing somebody else and cheating. And it's nothing to do with you. There may be factors that might have, culminated into their decision to go and do that. But ultimately, it should not reflect on you as a person. And also, if it does happen to you, you should never feel bitterness, because you can easily go on a downer and go, oh, the world's against me, woe is me, etc. And you can get in a hole. And I was in a hole for months, I would say. And what have I done wrong? And what have I done to get into this situation? But I think if you just think it's their problem, if they do that, that's their decision. You can't control it. And it's that I'm in my very kind of let them era. If they want to do that, let them. You're on a different path. And you've just got to stay true to yourself, your values, your morals, and you carry on your path.
That's beautiful. So would you say this experience, this, hitting rock bottom from rock bottom, made you take that decision of, let me just change my whole scenery altogether, right? And then move to Dubai, pursue a teaching career, and see how life, what wonders life has for me, right?
Yeah. That was the moment. I'd gone back home and I was on the up again in my mind. And that was the moment when I thought, there's something out there more than the town that I live in and more than the relationship I've had.
There's more world out there.
There's a big world out there. And I haven't had a chance to give it my all and live it. And alongside this, whilst this was going on, as if I wasn't at rock bottom at that moment, I'd also been for a routine screening for cervical cancer, as you go every 3 years. And it came back with cancerous cells, which was a complete shock. Couldn't believe, I'd had screenings for years, and it came up when I was 28. And they give you, when you have a screening, it's just a letter. Nobody kind of sits you down and says, this is what's happening. And the letter says, we found cancerous cells in your cervix. And the levels of it, they're either sin 1, sin 2, or sin 3. And that's the level of damage. And it just said, yours are sin 3, just there in black and white in a letter. Oh, that was hard hitting. Went for a biopsy. The biopsy came back, there is cancerous cells. We need to do an operation. And then after the operation, we let you know if they've all been removed or whether we need to go to the next stage. And there's all different stages of cervical cancer. And this was at the very beginning, thank God. It's at the early stage. So I went to the hospital, and the NHS in the UK it's a great system. It's a free service, but it's overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. It's at breaking point, really. And you have a long waiting list. So I had 2 weeks to wait for this operation. And everything goes through your mind, and you start Googling it, and you get into an even worse state. And my parents were really good. They were keeping me really level and saying, don't panic, go for the procedure, and then we'll deal with it when it comes back. Went for the procedure, and then all the cancerous cells they managed to remove. And that was that. That was the end of that chapter. But it had all come at once.
And all of this was happening in your life at the same time, was it? Like moving from your partner's to your parents' home, and then having to find out that you have cancer, going through that treatment. What was this timeline like? How much time was it between first incident to this? Was it like a year or a few years?
It was within 6 months of each other.
Wow.
So when you add both of those experiences, and then when I got the all clear, that's it. That's when the moment happened. My mum and dad and I just went out for a celebratory, meal. And it was, right, things need to change. And I had all of this oomph, like, what can I do now?
Yeah.
I need to change my life completely. I need to get out of where I am. Let's do this whole Dubai thing. Because I'd had my friends here, saying, come on, Lottie, this is the time now. Let's go. So I applied for a job, and then I got the job at Heartland International School, which is where one of my friends was teaching. And then I came out in August 2018. And that's where everything just skyrocketed. I met such an amazing friendship group. We're all friends now, 7 years on.
Wow.
All teachers at the same school. And I remember they picked us up from the airport in a minibus and they said, welcome to Dubai, took us to IKEA. We picked out IKEA furniture, took us to our apartments, which was in our Barsha at the time. And we were all in the same corridor, in the same building. And it was just like uni all over again. It was incredible. And then that was the start of life in Dubai teaching. So FS2 teacher. And we had, my friendship group and I, we had so much fun. We went on all of these trips. And of course, Dubai opens up travel. And my holidays at home, I'd never been abroad until I was 18. We did like bucket and spades holidays in the UK. And then to be able to go to Bali and Zanzibar, went to Australia and Thailand, and you're like, this is the whole world.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was great.
Coming from one town to seeing the world.
Yeah.
What would you say is that one thing that stood out about Dubai for you, which you'd say is, I could have never imagined that Dubai will be like this?
Well, I think when you're in the UK, you kind of hear sometimes horror stories about Dubai. You hear the bad things, weirdly. You don't hear all the good things, like it's been voted the safest city in the whole world. And there is an apprehension of, can I wear this? Can I do this? Can I say this? And then when you live it, you realise how inclusive it is. And my hometown, Ellesmere Port, is quite a very white background, very British. And here it's incredibly multicultural. Ethnicities everywhere living together. And when I was teaching, you know, you had children from every country in your class. And I thought, this is amazing. And they're all talking to each other in their home languages and then English as well. And you just think, this is just incredible. Everyone needs to experience a classroom like this.
Right.
And I would say to teachers everywhere, go and do at least a year abroad and experience this whole world in one classroom scenario. It's incredible.
Almost a decade in Dubai, right? 7 years, you said?
Yeah.
I've been in Dubai for 10 years now as well. It's incredible, like you said. You would not experience the kind of cultural mix match and yet the uniqueness of a place, you know, very distinguished. Like at one side, you have so many nationalities living together with their own flavors, but United Arab Emirates in Dubai has its own, you know, character as well. It's a very unique situation. And the way that they keep it like that, that is what stands out for me about Dubai, at least.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for today's episode, Lottie. I hope we see you again in the next one where we talk about your journey from being a teacher to something exciting.
Thank you so much, Adi. I really enjoyed myself today. Thank you.
Lottie's story reminds us that sometimes rock bottom is the foundation for something incredible. Her decision to start over, to trust in herself and take that leap, led to not just a new job, but a new life. And her journey doesn't stop there. In our next episode, we'll explore how she turned her passion for quizzes into a thriving business and became a leading quizmaster here in Dubai with her own company, QuizBiz. If you enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to tune in next week for part 2. Until then, let's keep finding joy from seeking.